Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second in the series of Ask the Ministers. I'm delighted to be joined this evening live in the studio by 4 members of government and for the first time by an audience. We have 90 minutes within which for you to ask those questions for those who are in charge of running our island. So what are you going to ask the ministers? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to our audience here this evening, to our panellists and to our viewers at home. My name is Lisa Springate and I am the chair of the Institute of Directors here in Jersey. I'm delighted to have been asked to host this panel session this evening and to be joined by our 4 ministers. In relation to introducing each of them, Senator Lyndon Farnham, Deputy Chief Minister, Economic Development Minister for Tourism, Sport and Culture. Deputy Judy Martin, Minister for Social Security. Senator Ian Gorst, Minister for External Relations and Financial Services. And last but no means least, Deputy Russell Labey, Minister for Housing and Communities. A very warm welcome to you all. Now, I'm delighted that already we've had lots of questions coming in on Slido. But for those of you who'd like to pose your questions to our ministers, and this is a really excellent opportunity for you to do so, all that you need to do is go onto any tablet and on the search engine type in Slido, slido.com, and when prompted to do so, ask the ministers and then pop in your question. We very much welcome those questions coming through. We're going to try and get through as many as possible this evening. But before we do so, I'm sure that the viewers and our audience here this evening would like to hear a little bit more about the roles of our ministers here this evening. Senator Farnham, if I can start by asking you first, I'm sure that when you took on this role and that you didn't appreciate, obviously, that we would be shortly faced with a global pandemic, which for any leader is really a challenging and exceptional time. But can you outline to our audience here this evening and to our viewers online a little bit more about what your role entails as Economic Development Minister? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, I was first elected by the Assembly as Minister for Economic Development in 2014, and since then the portfolio has grown to encompass culture, arts, heritage and sport. Of course, over and above that we have other issues, including transportation. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of 2018, following the last elections, we embarked upon a complete review of our future economy work. And just as we started to get into that, the pandemic hit. And of course, we all went into territory we were unfamiliar with. And it's been a huge, not only a huge shock initially, but a huge learning curve. And one thing that struck me since the beginning of the pandemic, and I think we might have all taken it for granted, is just how robust and resilient our economy has been or was to sustain in pretty good order the shock that we faced with the pandemic. That's not to say, of course, it hasn't caused huge pressures and huge challenges for many businesses and many sectors. And my role, primarily as Minister for Economic Development, is to work to not only maintain, develop and represent all business sectors, but to ensure, especially now that as we come out of the pandemic, we have strong foundations to build a new economic framework.
And we're going to be coming to that actually sort of in the next questions, because particularly from the IOD membership, we've got a lot of sort of interest through in terms of what is that vision actually for the island going forward, and we can perhaps come on to that very shortly. Deputy Martin, I'm sure actually as Minister for Social Security, it's not again been a quiet few months for you with the pandemic, and again we'd be very interested here within the audience and also our viewers at home to find out a little bit more. What's your daily role entail?
Well, the daily role, I mean, being Social Security Minister, I have to make sure that the funds have got enough money in and that, they've been stretched. Like Deputy Farnham says, we've had to lend some money out of the funds or not put any in, actually, so to help with the cost of the pandemic. And then we've got the healthcare fund that also helps the doctors. We do income support, which helps people when they need it. We got 1,000 more claims very quickly last year, in probably the first few months. That's going down. Mm-hmm. We pay pensions and long-term care benefit. We help people back into work, and in the fiscal stimulus we got 1.2 million, which, if any employers listening don't know, will pay the wages for a trainee with a full-time contract for 6 months, around £8,000. So if you're not sure that you could be in the scheme, and all we ask of the people down at Social Security is that they literally have been on the books for 6 months, unemployed and actively seeking work. But yeah, it's really diverse. There's always lots and lots to do. I've also, which last time around it fell under the Chief Minister, I've got diversity and inclusion. So that's and disability, which is
and
another
again,
big portfolio.
That's an area which is really quite important, actually, from a sort of an island perspective, and IOD has been focusing on that. And again, very much like to come back to that if we can in terms of the next round. In terms of your particular role, Senator Gorst, again, it's been far from quiet, as we've seen in recent times, with unusual sightings in our bays at times. In terms of Minister for External Relations and Financial Services, it's a wide remit, and I anticipate that obviously it's been extremely busy few months for you. But again, could we just outline and hear a little bit more about your role?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Indeed it has, and this week has really encapsulated the wideness of the role. So we've been very much focusing on, first of all, negotiating with the UK the Brexit deal and now the implementation of it. Not gone as smoothly as it might have done in all areas. And that's also on top of needing to build new relationships in light of the Brexit deal, alongside financial services, where we are thinking very much about the future. We're preparing for the Moneyval assessment, but we're also thinking about strategically where should our direction be in the future, and we've been engaging with the OECD and all the things that have been happening there. And this week's really encapsulated that. So being in London on Monday, meeting with the EU ambassador talking about fishing, meeting with a British minister talking about fishing, speaking to officials from London who will be attending the OECD meeting today, and then speaking with the Kenyan High Commissioner about global markets and markets around the world. So a pretty
diverse portfolio across the board,
right,
really is. Yeah. Thank you. And Deputy Labey, you're relatively new to this role, but again, you've come in at a very challenging time. I mean, you're coming in against the fact that against this pandemic, we've seen prices soar within the Channel Islands, and already there was a concern in terms of population and migration and the pressure on the housing. So again, what sort of, in terms of your daily role at the moment, in terms of what does that entail?
Yeah, well, this is my 154th day as Housing Minister. It was an unexpected vacancy and an unexpected appointment for me. My role daily is to learn as much as I can and as quickly as I can, to meet as many people as I can, the main players in the housing industry in Jersey, and to prioritise. I've inherited a very good document, a Policy Development Board report with 10 recommendations. It's about going through those recommendations and seeing how many of them we can achieve in the time I've got available to me until June the 22nd, 2022. And so that's what we're doing. And over these last 100 days, I've been able to, with my officers, formulate that plan and priorities. And I've published the Creating Better Homes Action Plan. And now I'm carrying it through.
Good. And I think this is quite clear. I'm just looking at some of the questions now that are starting to come through. There's a real interest, actually, and I think we can come back to some of these very shortly with you. But thank you very much to you all. It's really insightful just to hear a little bit more about what your roles entail. Just whilst we're on the topic of questions, please do, viewers online, if there's questions that have already been fed through and you would like to push them to the top of the queue, then please like those, because we'll deal with those first in terms of order of priority. And just a reminder for anybody who's just joined us, just in terms of any search engine, type in Slido, slido.com, and then when prompted, ask the ministers and then your question. And we look forward very much to hearing from you. But when I was asked to host today, I thought it was a good opportunity to go out to the IOD membership and ask them what they wanted me to ask the ministers here this evening. And if I could start with you, Senator Farnham. I mean, without doubt, these have been, as we've said before, exceptional and challenging times, both for leaders, but also for individuals and businesses. And, as an island, some sectors have clearly fared better and worse than others. But I think where we all do obviously share a very common goal is in terms of wishing to build back better as an island. And a good example of this is obviously recently with the British and Irish Lions that came over recently. Huge success for the island in terms of, the publicity, the good publicity for Jersey, and also the good feel-good factor also for people who live here. But in terms of your role as Economic Development Minister, you chaired the Economic Council that was, and just a little bit of background for our audience here and for our viewers, the Economic Council was established by government last summer, and it's a group of stakeholders which includes IOD Jersey and Chamber and other key stakeholders. And it was very much focused in terms of both the short-term measures required post-pandemic as well as the longer-term measures. And I think one question that the group always used to discuss was, what is that future vision for our island? We've got so much to be proud of as an island, but what is our future vision? And the question that's come from the membership minister is, what is government's long-term vision for the island? They've said it sounds sensible and it sounds reasonably straightforward, but are we really there yet? And in reality, is it hard to do because of our electoral cycle? So I think really what I'd like to hear really is, what are the barriers you face, and can you actually outline what our vision is for the island as Economic Development Minister?
Yeah, I think the first priority, or the top priority, has to be to get through the pandemic with as much of the economy as intact as possible. And that actually, I think one might think that that's getting easier as we get through the pandemic, but actually not. I think it's becoming a little bit more challenging, because we have managed to, with the financial support packages, to protect jobs and livelihoods and businesses, which have definitely resulted in some success in achieving that objective. As we come out of the pandemic now, a lot of businesses have an accrued deficit, and whilst we've been providing sums to keep them going, the taxpayer hasn't been able to support loss of turnover and loss of profits. Yeah. So actually we're going to be faced with businesses now who don't have the reserves, and that's something we have to monitor very carefully. Today we announced we're extending the business schemes for July and August, and during that time we're going to be monitoring and meeting with the last few sectors that have been hardest hit to ensure we can sort of get to the finish line and not undo any of the good work we've done. So that's priority number one. As we look ahead, and the work on the Economic Council, which was excellent, and will be right at the centre of guiding us as we put together the economic framework and the future economic planning. And as you know, Lisa, the Economic Council came up with 5 key themes: stimulating growth through entrepreneurial and innovation, sustainability, building into sustainability in what we do. So when we create new sectors, we make sure there's sustainability, and that's easier said than done. We don't really want to create new sectors that that don't have any longevity. I think we need to embrace, the new economy needs to embrace technology on a global scale, and we have the infrastructure there now to do it. Of course, the pandemic, what that has taught us is how to be smarter with technology, and of course we're doing that right now this evening with people joining online and asking questions, and we're all used to Teams and Zoom meetings, and that's, I think, going to be important. And I think we need to, something we have neglected for too long is the regeneration of our infrastructure and our public realm, and we're starting to see some big investment plan for that, including our hospital at Fort Regent,
Yes,
and the new government headquarters. And of course, go back to innovation, it's about education and skills. And I don't think we've worked hard enough in the past to develop education, the opportunities for our youngsters coming out of education on island skills. And a good example of that is the Digital Academy that is now teaching islanders to code. And of course, that is all about, at the heart of our productivity drive to grow our economy without having to import resource. Sorry, that was a long answer.
So is it fair to say, Minister, that in terms of your future vision, you think very much that the Economic Council paper, which is New Perspectives, and it's can be found on the government website, do you think that very much encapsulates your vision as Economic Development Minister going forward in terms of those 5 themes that we can really focus on as an island to really be bold and push forward with those themes?
In short, Lisa, yes, I do. There are other themes around that, and that we've had other input from other sectors.
But they complement very well the government
they
plan
work
and
together. They dovetail very nicely into the economic framework, which is a different work stream, but they're very closely aligned.
Thank you. Senator Gorst, if I can come to you next, because we've sort of been focusing in terms of what's the future vision for Jersey from an economic perspective. But obviously we've had that challenge before then with Brexit, and we've seen the challenges more recently as a result of that in terms of that yourself and your colleagues have done some really sterling work on. But how do you think the future looks for our island in terms of what challenges do you see ahead for us?
Well, we are only the latest government that has navigated international challenges that this island has faced, and we have always navigated them well, and we've always adjusted carefully the economy to where we thought there was opportunity that would benefit all islanders. And that's the same with Brexit. We didn't decide to Brexit, but we are now making a success of it, and we're engaged with the free trade agreement negotiations around the globe, and we very much believe that they can offer opportunity for us as well. And as Senator Farnham said, of course, this is the vision for Jersey going forward, which I think is shared right across the island. But we've got really strong building blocks in place right now, and it's a matter of us coming together, seeing the end of the pandemic, and then as we come together, I think we can build on those building blocks and we can have a very strong future. I'm not one that's pessimistic, but we've got to want to have a strong future. We've got to be confident about what the future holds for us, and we've got to build on the successes of those who came before us.
No,
and I
mean,
think we're all committed to
these
that.
are very positive remarks and good to hear from our leaders. And just on that, Deputy Martin, I think one thing that's very key from an IOD perspective is diversity and inclusion. And in fact, government has very kindly supported the vision statement, which is to become a charter. And we've got, I think, about over 70 businesses signed up to that charter. But I think in terms of from a Jersey perspective, and going sort of from our sort of previous 2 points of the future vision, we have to, don't we, as a society, be diverse and inclusive. Do you think that Jersey's doing enough in this space? And, you know, particularly even when we even look at sort of the last few months in terms of the health and well-being, do you think Jersey's, you know, doing what we should be doing, or should we be doing more?
Well, I think everyone can always do more, and we've had COVID, but we've had a disability strategy for quite a while, but we never had any money. And now we've got money. I've got people down at CLS, a good team to do diversity inclusion. Myself and Senator Farnham met with the team, and two of the officers were going away, and they report sort of weekly that they are meeting with people on there trying to promote them who want to stand for the Assembly, and what we need to do to overcome the physical and what would they need. We had somebody with a disability stand in the last senatorials, and there was even that, you know, they managed to do it, but it was hard.
No,
so
I mean, the Diversity Forum's doing some really great work, actually.
and again, as I say, I think it was Senator Rutter actually pushed, and Senator Gorst pushed for a good a disability diversity strategy, which was probably finished at about 15, but we never got any money. Now that it's coming on leaps and bounds.
What about health and well-being? I mean, we've obviously had a really challenging few months for individuals in terms of this working from home and then back in the office, then teams A and B.
Yeah.
Are we doing enough on the health and well-being side?
Again, I would say you could always do more. I was listening to a Deputy Poynton who's doing the children's mental health, and it's too long, waiting from referral to knowing what's wrong for about 7 weeks to see a specialist. In the UK, that's about 18 weeks, and we've brought Anne down. We want to bring it down more. And obviously, as you say, it's just, I think we're getting to the point, it's sort of not again, I can't work from home. I can do, I myself physically can do a short 2 or 3 hour Teams meeting. I know it helps everybody, but tomorrow we've got a full com from 9:30 to 5:30, and I can't look at that screen all day and just hear. I think
you're not probably alone in that.
Physical eyes, yeah, physical.
Thank you. Now, Deputy Labey, I know that the question that I had from the IOD membership is actually already on Slido, and in fact I can see a number of variations. So rather than ask it now, I think we should first turn to the audience for their questions, if I may please, actually. So the gentleman in the front row, would you like to go first? Thank you.
Certainly. With regards to the proposal outlined in the draft bridging island plan concerning the expansion of the Jigaland quarry following the supposedly speculative acquisition of the field MY966 by the quarry operators for 1.6 million, what are the Minister's views regarding the strategic value of continuing open mining extraction of minerals in areas of outstanding beauty, and the long-term strategic value of protecting the environment to promote and nurture tourism on the island?
So, tourism. Senator Farnham, would you like to deal with that? Thank you.
And thank you for that question. I have been working with others, with colleagues, on the development of our coastal national park and a potential for a greatly enlarged marine park. That's actually greater enlargement of our marine protected areas, and the same view extends to further on island quarrying. Of course, the challenge we've had is having the infrastructure in place to import the large amounts of materials that we need. So there is certainly a challenge there, and that has to be managed. But I am in favour of reducing the amount of quarrying on island, providing the infrastructure to import. There is an argument, there's a lot less work to be done, but early indications state that it certainly won't be more expensive to do that. It could be a little less, but we have to also remember the volumes we use as an island are very small compared to national and international markets. So I think the answer to your question is I would support less quarrying on island, but first we need to get our infrastructure in place so we can import what we need.
Thank you. That's fine. Okay. Could I turn to the next member of the audience actually that'd like to ask their question, and could they introduce themselves, please? Thank you.
It's Don Baker. A general question, which is quite relevant today, because the COVID figures have suddenly shot up from 250 to 315. And I've been contacted by a number of parents in Jersey, but also speaking to people in the UK about whether there's a need for compulsory vaccination of school children. Now, in France recently, they've instigated a programme to insist that school children be vaccinated. And in fact, children born in France from Monday will now receive 11 compulsory vaccinations, obviously including the COVID vaccination. My thinking on this is it's to protect the few vulnerable children, and certainly there are children that suffer from all sorts of underlying health issues that could be dramatically affected by COVID. Now, in Jersey, there's certainly a number of the population that are anti-vaccine, and there's parents concerned about the fact that there are good examples around the world of children dying from either first or second vaccinations. So it's a bit of a quandary. Where does the panel sit in terms of young children having vaccinations, whether they should be compulsory or not?
Deputy Martin?
Well, it's very interesting to hear that France are going to make young children compulsory, because I didn't realise France was so anti-vax in the whole of the population until the COVID thing. So I think that's, I'll believe that one when I see it, because they're not going to like it. Children are not getting very seriously ill. with COVID. I don't think I would like to make anything compulsory for anybody, either age, and it's just too much of a, you've still got people want the choice. People have the choice. People have had COVID. They think they're immune. A lot are immune. We were talking today. It was a question in one of our briefings. If you go to Israel, they won't use a certificate. They want to see your antibodies, and if you're immune, you're immune. You can walk around straight away, and they do it very quickly. Israel's been doing great, but then we've been doing great. The younger generation might spread it, but if you've got the majority, the older population who have got the choice of their own, having the vaccines, it's the numbers I watch daily are the care homes and the hospital, 0 and 1. It's been 0, 0, and that's what we've really now got to look at. People will get ill with it. Numbers will go up, but they won't get seriously ill.
Thank you very much. Senator Gorst,
I think it's very important that we recognise the nuanced argument about whether under 18 should have a vaccination at all. I personally would be against making it compulsory, as I've, having toyed with the idea several months ago, was against the idea of making the vaccination compulsory for anyone. We'd step into a very difficult position as a government if we were going to make it compulsory. We've already had to do some things which are extremely uncomfortable as a government, taking away people's civil liberties, and we shouldn't do it without great consideration. So if you were to make it, as you say France are doing, you would be making young people compulsory take the vaccination to potentially deal with the vulnerable islanders that had chosen not to take the vaccination. Now, in any form of calculation, I don't think that that can be right. What we are doing, of course, is waiting for the JVCI, I think it's called in the UK, to make their announcement about whether we should offer vaccinations to under 18s, but even that, I think they're looking at between 15 and 18 initially. It's difficult as a parent. I can make a free choice to be vaccinated, and I have. We've now got around 90% of over 50s fully vaccinated. We're less in the under 50s, but we're making good progress. By the middle of July, we'll have anybody be over 18 who wants to have had their first vaccination will have been able to have it. And that is how we're then going to be able to step through and live with COVID. So far, the symptoms for under 18s have been milder than they have for the rest of the population. But what we've learnt with COVID is we can be certain of one thing one day, and the next day the evidence can turn it on its head, and we have to change our decision. As we sit here, no to compulsory vaccination to under 18s. The verdict is still out whether we should offer it at all.
thank you very much indeed, both Deputy Martin and Senator Gorst. Thank you. Thanks for the question. I'd now like to turn to our viewers online, because we have quite a few questions this evening to get through. And the first one is very much related to actually what we've just been talking about with COVID. Is it realistic to expect events this summer, please? Clarification would be appreciated, as staff are on their knees waiting to work. Who would like to take?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, it is very realistic to expect events this summer. In fact, there are a number of events of all sizes currently planned, working with guidelines and with the bailiff's office and a committee that's been constituted to work with event organisers to make sure these events can go ahead. The continued restriction on household gatherings over 20 people has, I think, been problematic. I mean, none of us really like, insisting on these rules, but that has had an impact on the smaller events and gatherings, because private events, people are saying, well, hang on, we can have large events for hundreds of people or thousands of people, but we can't have 30 people to attend an event around our own home. That very hopefully is coming to an end on the 15th of July. We've announced today a 10-day extension to the current
That's the latest
restrictions.
reconnection.
So that's the latest reconnection plan. And ministers have made it absolutely clear that there's no appetite for going beyond that date. And of course, that has been supported by our medical advisors, who have now sort of downgraded the risk from COVID to society because of the strong progress of the vaccination program. So the answer is yes, events can go ahead.
So although we're seeing obviously a lot of rising numbers and they're going up quite fast, I think from what I understand is because the hospitalisations are nominal, that's where the focus should be at the moment from the community's perspective, and so there's not a concern when they look at the app all the time and they see this number rising quite rapidly.
We've had two key objectives from day one of the pandemic, and that is to protect clinical capacity and to protect the most vulnerable age groups in our society, and we have achieved both of those objectives right now. Okay, so that's meant we have the risk to a serious risk to health is lessened considerably. The under 35 age groups are far less statistically driven. They're far less to become ill or seriously ill from the pandemic, and so we're just about at that stage now where we can say, the balance of risk is acceptable. And I think the mood of the public has changed considerably recently. The public now understand and realise there will always be a risk from COVID forevermore. It's with us as is every other disease that's dangerous to the human race. And I think we're pretty much now prepared, majority of us prepared to live with that risk, and we're getting to the stage where those that should be allowed to return to normality. And of course, if islanders want to remain careful, then they can make their own choices and take their own precautions. But the sooner we get to that position, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, the next one, if I could turn to you, Deputy Labey, because I was saying before that the IOD membership, one of their questions is very much along the lines of, we've had this issue with population and migration for a while, but that's been exacerbated over the last few months because of this real surge in house prices that, surely isn't sustainable at the pace at which it's going. But in terms of one of the questions from our viewers online is, what are we going to do about buy-to-lets becoming the norm for the higher classes to make money in Jersey when it causes rocketing flat prices and ridiculous rentals?
Yes, and my position on the buy-to-let situation is this. If someone's nice-to-have third, fourth, fifth or sixth buy-to-let is depriving another person of their necessity, a chance to get on the housing ladder and buy a home, then that isn't ethical. We know, because of low interest rates, that you get a better return investing in property, buying a buy-to-let property, than you do possibly putting your money, keeping your money in the bank, and that's inflating the market. Now, one of my first acts as Minister was to say, let's end the conveyancing of property by share transfer. In other words, stopping foreign investors buying property in Jersey, and meaning that those buying properties or homes in Jersey are qualified to live in them. With buy-to-lets, that is work I would like to do. I think we should have a look at this. It needs to be properly researched and evidenced. We have to be careful, and I've got a new strategic housing and regeneration group. This is a new thing for the government of Jersey that we're setting up. I've got a fantastic person appointed, and I'm very excited. I'll be very excited to tell the island about who that is when I can, when it's signed. And that unit is going to look at issues like this, but and urgently, because the buy-to-let situation in Jersey is a worry for me.
But it is a real challenge, isn't it, Deputy Labey? Because either for those who are born in the island and have gone to work in London and want to come back to the island, or those who are simply born here and have remained in the island. I mean, with the surge, particularly of late, for a first-time buyer, it's just even for a couple that's both earning, it's a huge challenge for them. And it goes back to this diversity and inclusion that we were talking about, earlier. That it's important as an island in terms of ensuring that we keep and retain talent in the island, that we do ensure that, we've got a good hospital, we can come on to that, I'm sure the H word will be mentioned tonight on one of the questions, that we've got a good education system, but we've also got affordable housing. So you're new into this role, which is it's good to have a new set of eyes in terms of as a minister in this space. So, what's your vision as housing minister for the road ahead for Jersey?
The single biggest thing I can do to address all those very valid points that you make, Lisa, is this: facilitate greater supply. We need to build more homes. And the second most important thing is to signal that, to tell people, tell the market that these homes are coming down the line. I mean, Andean themselves will complete 1,045 units, new units, affordable units, by the end of 2023, and there's more to come. And what I've done is to say the government has got to get better at releasing sites for our housing providers, the trusts, SOJDC, Andium, whatever. We've got to release those sites earlier, so our housing pipeline should stretch further into the future. So I'm talking about sites like Le Kennevet School, which it might have to have a community component in there. But if we're going to say to Andium, look, 80% of that site is going to be houses, and I think it should be, that we know is not available to 1996. But if we tell the provider now, you're going to get it as soon as the health department vacate, in 4 or 5 years' time, they can do the difficult planning process. So we get it all right in planning terms. And then the spade can go in the ground as soon as those sites are available. So I've pledged by the end of this year to get a decision on government sites like the Labar Centre, like Lamott Street, like Le Kennevet School, there are others, Westaway Court, so that we can plan better. And then my strategic housing and regeneration team will look at what's coming down the pipeline further, years into advance, and check that it's the right size of houses, 2 beds, 3 beds, whatever, the rental market, to fulfil the needs. So we manage the demand better.
Well, this is very positive to hear for our audience and also our viewers online that, from the Economic Development Minister, that we've got this vision in terms of the 5 themes that we can focus on: sustainability, infrastructure, education, tech and innovation, and also from yourself that in terms of where that focus is, because I think if we are to build back better as an island post-Brexit and post the pandemic, that, we really do need to ensure that all of these these positives are taken forward for the island and acted upon. And I think also what we've seen, which is a positive from the last few months, is not only an acceleration with regards to technology and some of the other areas in terms of working from home, etc., but also the agility that we've seen from government and the speed at which we've seen. I mean, would anybody like to comment on that particular point? I mean, we dealt with it, didn't we, Senator Farnham, in the context of the Economic Council and the paper New Perspectives, that, how can we build on this agility and this quick decision-making that we've seen over the course of the pandemic?
In relation to, and for me, one of the biggest problems the island faces is the supply and the cost of housing. With the Housing Minister, I've had a number of conversations about that. And as well as increasing the supply, we have to be able to enable people to buy into that supply. And of course, as a society, our approach to buying property has been, the standard sort of mortgages, which have a 20 or 25-year term, and if you miss 3 payments, you've got a problem, and this kind of thing. I think there's a real opportunity here to provide really long-term, flexible equity partnership agreements with housing, which flex between, a rent and an equity payment. We haven't got enough time to sort of elaborate on how that works. There are examples emerging around the world that we need to look at. But I think if we can actually provide the financial support to get people into these new homes, then we're going to make strong progress. So they have to work hand in hand. But you have to do. You can't increase the supply or the financial options ahead of the actual housing supply coming in. So those are 2 work streams, and I know the Housing Minister is on it.
And just going back to the Housing Minister, actually, I know that we've got a gentleman, Ryan, in the audience. There's quite a good theme in terms of this housing that I'd just like to go back to, if I could, please, Deputy Labey, with you.
Yeah.
Ryan, could you state your full name? Thank you.
My name's Ryan Long. So my question, how will low-income, local and Jersey-born members of the public supported in renting or buying properties, as the current climate in prices currently benefits mid to high earners?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for the question. My immediate priority, and the work has started on this, is to review the social rents policy, what renters are paying in Andium homes. It's 90% of market rates up to. None of us are very keen on that. We'd all like to see that come down. It's how we do it, and can we do it, and can we help people who most need the help and target that help. So that is underway. We had a very good meeting with Andium about it last week, and very, very soon, towards the end of the summer, we'll come up with that plan. We want to try to make renting... Look, the outcomes here, let's look at it from what we want to achieve, and it's a realistic hope for every islander, if they want to actually buy a house, get on a housing ladder, and also to make renting a property in Jersey as stress-free as possible and safe and secure. And I'm directed by the Policy Development Board to look at rent stabilisation. We have rent stabilisation in Jersey already in terms of the standard tenancy agreements, which are the ones recommended by Citizens Advice. They're the ones used by landlords with 1 or 2 or 3 properties. It's good practice that in these standard tenancy agreements, rent rises are just RPI and no more than that. We want to promote that. That's good practice, and we want to see that rolling out across the whole sector. I've got to look at the rental tenancy law is way out of date, and we want to redraw that so we get better protection for those who are renting. I'm guessing you want me to wind up now, Lisa.
No, not at all. No, that's fine.
And then we've got to, as Lyndon was saying, we've got to look at how we can help people access buying a home. And I have got £10 million available to me for that purpose from the start of 2022. And now, I get, and I'm sure you do too, Ministers, emails regularly about people paying high rents who can't afford to save for their deposits. And it seems to me, and we're commissioning the Consumer Council to help us scope this, and we're doing the work on how best we can target that money. It seems to me that is an ideal pot to help people with their deposits. And, well, I know Lyndon and I want to try and go further than that. Look at the products available, see if government also can help facilitate people getting a mortgage like the old states loans of old. So those are the you bring up really big subjects, Ryan, and they are on the top of my priority list.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy. One question that has certainly come to the top of the polls is, please could the Ministers explain their rationale for voting for a Children and Education Minister today who has no experience in education, whilst the other 2 very competent candidates appear to be very well qualified for the role? Who would like to take that question?
Be quick, because I know the others will want to answer as well. I think we had 3 very good candidates. Both Rob and Louise were excellent candidates, and I voted for Deputy Wickenden because I've worked with him in government. He's been the assistant minister there. He's been managing the portfolio, and I was extremely impressed by his commitment and his passion for the role. Scott isn't a teacher, and he hasn't been a teacher, but he's not a lecturer, an educational psychologist, a clinical psychologist. He's not a social worker. He's not a school nurse. He's not. It's not just all about teaching, and I know teachers have perhaps more knowledge about certain aspects of education than Deputy Wickenden would, but it's about more than that. And that's why I voted for Deputy Wickenden. It was a difficult choice. For many members, we saw how close the vote was, but I think you do a great job.
Thank you. Would any of the other ministers like to add anything to that?
I'm happy to. I do think we've got a system whereby Chief Minister puts forward their preferred candidate, the person that they can work with, the person that shares the ideology of the Chief Minister or the government, and yet then we have the Assembly potentially towards the end of a governmental term wanting to put somebody else into that position. And let's be clear, at least one of those candidates had set themselves up as the opposition to what government was doing in education. And also, let's be honest with people about what party politics will bring to our community. I think we've had a great consensus approach to politics, but we are inevitably, with the change in the electoral system, moving towards a party approach. We see new parties being created virtually every day, it seems, now, Lisa. And when you have party politics, then you do have decisions where people are making decisions because one party has set themselves up against the government as opposition. And this is what will be the flavour of politics, if we're not very careful, of Jersey going forward.
Thank you.
Lisa, can I just say
yes,
on,
please
on
do.
that one,
Please do.
I know this from personal experience, of course. Coming in as a minister mid-term is difficult. It takes 100 days to learn the ropes. It really does. We don't have that luxury with just a year left to put in a new minister. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Scott's been doing the job for those 100 days already, and this was easily the best thing to do, so that we haven't got another 100-day hiatus. And he's a super bright, brilliant operator, very analytical, and gets on very, very well with people, and gets people working together. And so I think it's a good appointment. But the other two were great too. But in these circumstances, he was the obvious choice for me.
But you raise a good point, all of you, actually. I mean, this is a new role. You know, it takes, as with any role, a certain period of time within which to bed in. And maybe, possibly, the mindset within Jersey should change and shift and be more of a team Jersey in terms of being supportive. Behind these people, and this is obviously what we're going to go on to with the IOD election campaign, to actually push people and support them, actually, if they want to stand forward as leaders for the island. Right, we've got lots of questions here to go through. So in terms of, will Jersey lose business if the States Assembly ratify the global corporation tax? Senator Gorst, one perhaps for you, for
yes,
financial
well,
services?
It's with the greatest of respect to the questioner, it's not quite what is being agreed and what has gone through another hurdle only today. With the OECD. It's about a new building block of a tax regime that will deal with multinational tech companies, or the largest 100. As it's currently drafted, of course, regulated financial services are outside of that. There is a need to change the global tax architecture, corporate tax architecture, to deal with tech companies, and that should be done at a global level, which is what the OECD is trying to do, which is why Jersey today has supported the agreement that's been reached. It's got two pillars to it, so that's really two bits to it. One is about that, the other is about, if you're going to do that, you better have some sort of global corporate tax rate in order to make it a level playing field. That currently will not be a global minimum standard like the first bit will be, and so Jersey in due course will be able to decide if it wishes to take part in that, and it'll do that in consultation with islanders, and it will ultimately be a state's decision. But we have nothing to fear from this. We have nothing to fear from international agendas that are globally applied through bodies that we have a full part in these conversations. My officials have been taking part in these conversations for 2 or 3 years. Actually, it's quite an exciting development that we can support and we can navigate well in Jersey's best interest. So I think the questioner might be slightly misunderstanding because some of the reporting, to be fair, is quite technical, it's quite detailed. Some of the reporting itself slightly misunderstands what's happening.
Thank you, Minister. One question again that's topping at the moment, the polls, is in terms of the announcement today, and are the latest delays to Jersey's Freedom Day justified, given the impact, and also in terms of where all ministers in agreement over the latest delay? And I suppose it's picking up on your point, Minister, from when will we return to a new normal? Is this the new normal? So were ministers all in agreement with today's announcement, with the reconnection, in terms of the announcement that was made?
Do you want me to go first? The reality is that we sat up late into the night discussing what we should do, and it wasn't, I'm afraid to say, it wasn't the first time that we've done that over these matters, where it is a matter of finely balanced judgment, and the advice from the clinicians isn't in itself unanimous. And we landed on the date. Some ministers would have liked to have split out the changes, and I think Lyndon won't mind me saying he was one of those. But we landed on that date for the reason that I said earlier, which is by the 15th of July, every islander over 18 who wants a vaccination will have been able to have their first vaccination. Mm-hmm. Take another month for them all to have be doubly vaccinated. But there are protections that come from that first vaccination that gave us the confidence and has given clinicians the confidence to advise us that we could make those steps. But I was very clear, Lyndon was very clear, that the 15th of July, as other people have said, ought to be and should be, and in our minds, is Jersey's Freedom Day, the day that we start to live with COVID. We're not going to go right back to normal because, you know, it's going to take time for some of us to get used to living with being that bit more careful, because the virus is still circulating, as we're seeing with the numbers, but we hope that the symptoms remain relatively mild. But we've also got to be honest with islanders and say, those islanders that haven't taken the vaccination, this virus could still be very difficult for them and could ultimately be deadly for them. But we are in the world now where islanders are making their own choices about whether they take the vaccination or not. And I've had some islanders contact me who haven't had the vaccination for all sorts of good reasons and said, you've got to be very careful that you're not now discriminating. And indeed we have. But it is a matter of individual choice, and I am a very strong believer in individual choice.
Thank you. Now we've got rather a fun question next. Is there any chance that there can be a pop-up football fan zone for the rest of the Euros, maybe at Howard Davis Park, and work it like the film festivals, safe in the open air and good to get people out and about and socialising? I think that's perhaps one for you, Minister.
Oh, well, I would love to see that. I think it's perhaps a little bit too soon for, excuse me, this Saturday, I think, is that not, whenever the England match is. Saturday, yeah. So, and in light that we are extending of the COVID numbers, we're extending, I think, so that's probably too big enough. But I would love to see a fan zone set up in the unlikely event of England getting to the final. I think we should have one. With the appropriate guidelines, of course. Yeah.
But we obviously rescheduled this evening because of the match earlier this week, which was a great result for all. No, that's really positive. In terms of other questions that we've got sort of coming through in terms of popularity, one perhaps for you, Senator Gorst. Will the French be granted endless open time and quotas to pillage our seas, or will our government stand up and be counted before our seas are sort of bereft of fish?
No, they won't, because we are living by the new trade agreement. But let's be clear, none of us want to go back to what happened a couple of months ago, where there was friction, completely disproportionate threats coming from our French neighbours, and all sorts of threats that we had to take seriously. I don't want to go back to that, where both sides are having a side of brinkmanship. It's not in anybody's interest. It's in our interest to keep sitting round the table with the European Union. Let's, you know, we can have a little bit of anti-French sentiment from time to time, and I enjoy that like anyone. But at the end of the day, this is a trade deal with the European Union, and it's the European Union that is at the table dealing with these really technical, difficult issues. And I believe fundamentally in our officials, who are the ones working through these great difficulties. So it will be resolved. But we've got to keep our heads, we've got to keep calm, because that's in Jersey's best interest. And let's be honest, it's in Jersey's fisheries' best interest. Because if we take our bails off the wicket, as it were, and say, right, that's it, game's up, first of all, we'll be in breach of the new trade agreement. Secondly, fishermen won't be able to export their shellfish into the European market, which is happening right now. Tons and tons of shellfish. We went on a visit on Friday to see all of it being exported into Europe now. That can still happen through the trade deal. If we walk away and don't deal with these difficult technical issues, that will stop. That's not in our interest at all. And by the way, as a community, we need to have a positive relationship with France and with Europe, because it's in our broader and wider economic interest. Take data protection, for example.
No, I mean, it's a very good point, Minister, in terms of, in maintaining those good relationships like we have with the UK and all globally as well. Just we're going to be going again shortly to the audience, but before we do that, I've got one for you, Deputy Martin, if I may. Social Security has recently announced a rise of 1.1% in October. How does that match up with rents that have gone up as much as 50% in the past 5 years?
Well, 1.1%, I actually got just over £1 million, and I had to cut the cake. It's not Social Security, it's income support. It went past on Wednesday. So we give the first child an extra £5, so families with children now get £15 extra. We're doing 555. I've also put the nursery component up to help working parents from 550 something to 670 next year, because there's going to be more hours and that's going to go up. And then the rest was crossed of all the components. But Andium, if you're in Andium and social housing, the rent is covered. So whatever the rent is, and if you've got not working or your part rent, they cover it. So there's the rest, which Russell is talking about in the private sector, haven't gone up that much. I could have put the whole lot to rents, but there's a lot more people who rent in the private sector who, let's say, they'll want a bit of support for a lot less time. So you have to look at all these things in the round, but it's not Social Security, it's income support payments. And because of next year as well, and the price, we've got some more money, it was 2.6 million, we're putting up all the components next year on the 1st of October, just so we know that people on low incomes won't have to wait for who the next minister is.
Good.
It's been
so
agreed.
That continuity in light of the election.
It's all different. Everything falls next year. I couldn't have lodged it, and then the next minister took it through.
So
we had a bit
continuity there for
absolutely,
people
that will
to
go
alleviate
up
that
again
concern.
October next year. Yeah.
Good. I'd like to go.
I did just wonder if the questioner was actually asking about the return to the previous level of Social Security contribution that we had a reduction of throughout the COVID period.
And that's
Well,
gone
that
back,
was
isn't it?
2%.
That's just
Yeah, that's
reverted.
2%, so
Yeah, I
it's
think
not clear from the question.
Income support was 1.1, so that's what I took it
Yeah,
as.
I think that's fine, but it's reverted on the Social Security, hasn't it, now,
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kind of holiday period that there was for everybody?
Yeah, it cost about 26 million, hopefully spent in the local economy, and probably most people were here, so it was, and then it goes back up this month,
Thank
to
you very
6%.
much. Thank you. If I can go to our audience, could I turn to Steve, please? If, Steve, you could state your full name and your question. Thank you very much
Good
indeed.
evening, Steve Beddoe. I'd like to ask Senator Farnham how he can justify the demolition of 7 fantastic houses at Westmount Terrace so that a multi-storey car park can be built straddling green zone fields, a brooding menace over the town, when a park and ride scheme can be built that creates a 6-acre beachfront park that would have a 2-minute shuttle transfer time to the hospital. We would save on the road, we wouldn't have to realign the road, we'd save the bowling green, and we'd save millions and millions of pounds.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for the question. If I can answer the second part first. I think a park and ride scheme is an essential part of the new hospital, but it can't be the key transportation lead to the hospital itself. It just won't work. The road itself, we've done a lot of work on the road. We explored over 70 options, and we came up with the option. Now, Steve will probably understand this, between option 6 and option 7. Option 6 would do nothing. Option 7 was the changes to the shape and the incline, and we've sort of finding a compromise where a lot of the road won't need to be widened, but some of it does need to be widened, because the infrastructure currently of Westmount Road is just not up to handling all of the new traffic and transport that's required to go to and from the hospital. Of course, one of the issues that we're facing at the moment as a result of the feedback we've received from parishioners and islanders is in relation to the sustainable transport corridors. Next to the 6.7 metre wide road, there has to be another in excess of 4 to 5 metres of footpath and cycle path in line with the state's objectives on sustainable transport. And so we're having another look at that. Nobody wants to see any homes demolished, but I think in a building of that size, you would have, wherever you build it, there's going to have to be some take of land and property, with perhaps the exception of People's Park. But I don't really want to go there. If we think we're getting opposition to Westmount, I think the opposition to People's Park would have been far greater. So no, nobody likes to see that, Steve, but it is necessary to produce a new hospital campus at Westmount.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Could we get a microphone just to Steve, if possible? Thank you very much indeed.
thank you very much for your answer. However, this park and ride scheme was presented to the St Helier Roads Committee, who unanimously endorsed the scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that the road needs to be realigned, but every person I talk to doesn't accept that. They think there's solutions that exist, whether it's smart lights or a one-way system. And nobody that I've spoken to can understand the rationale. And so I'm sorry.
Maybe this one, Steve's possibly a good one to take offline, actually, in terms of, to follow up actually with, if that's okay. We're going to go next, if we may, because we're just conscious of the time, Steve, so thank you so much for your question. But we're going to go to Colin, who is an IOD member, Colin Solomon, who's on Zoom. He's presently in France, so hopefully if technology is with us, we should now see him on Zoom. Perfect. Colin, welcome. Good evening. Would you like to pose your question, please, Colin, for the ministers? Thank you. Possibly Colin on mute, or it may be a sound issue from this perspective. Something that we're all very familiar with, that comment in the last few months. We've all done it. Okay, maybe whilst we're just...
Lisa,
perfect. Thank you.
Lisa, I'm pleased to confirm I was indeed on mute. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your answers so far. I'd like to paraphrase Senator Farnham and start my question with the line that with travel links so vital but struggling, has the support provided by way of a loan to Blue Islands been duplicated in any way for Condor ferries, or does it need to be? And with some £45 million having been spent on testing a population of 106,000 and visitors to the island, would it not be sensible to accept negative PCR tests tested elsewhere other than in the common travel area before someone arrives, for example from St Malo, as acceptable evidence that that person is free of COVID, rather than testing passengers on arrival from France into the island at island taxpayers' costs? This would reduce the number of on-island cases identified through inward-bound travel who potentially infect island residents. In all of France, there were just 2,500 positive cases detected yesterday, and the rate of infection is less than 25 cases per 100,000. Sorry, that was really three questions.
No, thank
in
you,
one.
Colin. And I'm sure it's very much one close to your own heart, based, given that you're based in France for some of the time. So if I could turn to you, Senator Farnham, I think, for that response.
Thank you, Colin, for the questions. To the first question you asked, we are currently working with Condor and their owners on a new operating agreement, and we have provided financial support to Condor, the details of which were made public about 6 weeks ago. So we are standing by to make sure that our lifeline transport providers have been and will continue to be supported throughout the pandemic. Now we get on to the subject of testing and tracing. And actually, I mean, we could probably resolve the COVID problem tomorrow by stopping testing and then let nature take its course. Now we're a largely protected society. And it's interesting that we've carried out over 500,000 tests, Guernsey about 120,000, but actually we have this very similar positivity rate. So I think you can work out from that the difference in approaches we've taken. We've really gone to make sure we test and protect our citizens. I know it's not been popular through the pandemic, and actually now we're coming into the zone where vast majority of islanders are safe and protected. I think we really need to revisit that policy. I'm not sure how much longer it is to contact trace to the extent that we're doing. We've already seen the challenges and problems it's causing for our young people, although that's been alleviated recently with the relaxation of the requirement to isolate. So I'm concerned that we spent, I think, almost 40 million, the projection is 40 to 45 million on tests, and I think, especially as we get to the middle of August, when everybody who wants it could have had the full vaccination, then we can start, looking about, do we continue to publish the numbers? Do we continue to track and trace? Just very quickly on about England being red, something that sat uncomfortably with all of us is the fact that the policy has alienated young people, the 18 to 35 age group, many of whom through no fault of their own have not been able to receive full vaccination, so they still have to isolate. Well, at the CAM meeting, Senator Gorst and I asked the medical advisors to consider and put a paper together and come back to ministers early next week, and the request was that could we not allow young people in that age group who have received one jab to be treated in the same way as older age groups that have received 2 jabs. So we're waiting to hear that. If we sort of get a green light on that, then I think we're in a really good space.
It's very much an area of focus, isn't it, that I think obviously government has got as a priority from what we understand. Now, going back to one of the previous themes in terms of, we're seeing a lot more parties come forward than ever before, actually. We know that there's obviously 2 or 3 more possibly in the pipeline to come through. So what our viewers are interested in, and it's a great question, so thank you who's pushed this to the top of the queue. Are the ministers willing to join prospective political parties? Deputy Labey, can I start with you?
I would be, I think.
Anybody listening, then this is the perfect opportunity to get a strong candidate through.
I can tell you, hand on heart, honestly, I'm not involved in any political party. Any of the embryonic ones, the ones that might emerge, and I wouldn't be a very good party member at the moment because I can't contribute to setting up a political party. I've got too much on my plate. But I think it could be healthy. I think I'll probably end up standing as an independent, but hopefully with Judy and Scott, we'll do our thing to say, we're a good team for our district, and so consider us together.
Judy, do you agree with that? Are you online?
I couldn't put my hand on heart because I am in talks, put it that way, and I've been persuaded because if I stand, and that's another if, I would have done 22 years next May, and that would be my 8th election in June. So I'm seriously thinking, but I actually think what I've seen over the last, probably maybe COVID's brought to the edge where you need to get things done quickly, you need to know who's on your team and these will be the people, etc., etc. Our system's not set up for it. It will be very interesting. If you've got a party, you've got 26 people in, the rest as well might as well go home. Because scrutiny, why would you? I mean, you wouldn't get a vote passed in the States. It's not set up. But I'd be very interested, and if I stand again, it would probably be in a party, yeah.
It sounds potentially, Deputy Labey, that you might be needing to give a little bit more persuasion.
I might need to give him a bit of a kick.
Now, Senator Gorst, I'm not going to ask you a question in terms of would you stand for a party, but my question's more, do you think party politics is good, going back in terms of for the future of the island? Are we at that point that we do need to start looking more at sort of party politics and sort of change the focus going forward?
Well, I was going to answer the question as written. The two new form parties I've not been formally invited to join. I think I once, possibly by mistake, voted for a Reform Jersey proposition in the Assembly, and they jokingly invited me to join them. So it's. I think that parties have got to come from the people. People have got to want parties to represent them and coalesce around visions and policies. And if that is what happens over the next 6 months, that people rally to particular parties, then I'm not totally against them, but I don't really always see the benefit that those who are strongly in favour of parties indicate they have. Because the arguments that we have in open in the Assembly, in a party system, you have them behind closed doors, and you have even fewer people influencing the policy direction of the party, because you create this little executive, you create lip service to what the membership wants, and in reality you have fewer and fewer people driving the policy direction, and then they come into government and drive what happens in government. And that's, in a small community, is not always healthy. So for me, the verdict is still out.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to be circling back to this actually towards the end. But in the interim, it's very topical this as well, given the discussions in the States Assembly over the course of the last few days. Medicinal cannabis. I'm certainly sort of familiar with this theme from a financial services perspective in terms of the developments in the legislation. So there's a gentleman that has said, I'm prescribed medicinal cannabis, I'm a prescribed medicinal cannabis user and would like to cultivate my own plants for personal consumption. Is there a licence available for local residents to home grow for personal use? Minister.
We're not at that stage yet. Anybody wishing to participate in the cultivation of cannabis for medicinal reasons are required to apply for a licence, and it's not one where you turn up to the parish hall and sign a form and get a licence. It's a rigorous process that's overseen by the Health Minister and the Chief Pharmacist, working with a memorandum of understanding from the UK Home Office, who have extended the benefits of the UN Cannabis Agency to Jersey to allow us to do that. So I mean, technically anybody could apply for a licence, but I think at this stage it would be far too onerous for any sort of domestic growth.
Thank you, Minister. I'm just going to do one more Slido question because we're getting through them quite well, actually. And then I'm just going to turn to Scott, if I may, in our audience very shortly. So would increasing the minimum wage into a living wage alleviate social security transfer payments to benefit the government's expenditure? It's one for you.
It does sound very easy, doesn't it? I'm literally looking at the minimum wage now and how it's set and what it's set against. And it used to be done by the Employment Forum, who go out to industry. Couldn't go last year. I mean, couldn't literally charge around farms, and hospitality was closed. And you hear the story, and I don't disbelieve the story that, you know, if you make me pay the living wage, which is coming on near £11 now, I will not take on the extra few staff. Everyone else suffers, and then or I get back to so much unemployment that I don't make the benefit bill go down. But we are aiming. You know, I want everyone paid a fair day's pay for for fair day's work. Yeah, I'll get there. Yes. But I have to listen, and that's what the Employment Forum normally does for me. But I've been out to a long consultation, I don't know, to everyone on the island. I've pushed it, and we've done it through Social Security. It's my consultation, and we're just sifting through now what that will come back, and even now in the years to come, how it will be done. And if we get a good year, do we benchmark it that it should go up against something every year? Because it is a lot of time, and the Employment Forum might be able to do different things. when they didn't do the minimum wage, they were able to consult on rest breaks and holidays, which we've had 2 weeks and no rest breaks in the day since the employment law come in. And I'm now going to increase that. But they had time to do that properly, and they talked to employers. So it's a very fine balance. It's a very fine balance.
Thank you. Okay, if we could go back to our audience, to Scott, please. Thank you very much, Scott. If you could state your name, thank you very much.
Scott Hollywood. While we're hoping for a successful July and August and appreciate the current support given and the announcements made today, how is government looking to support key sectors of business, including hospitality, in the coming months? As you must be aware, that the seasonality of the island means that hopefully a good July and August is not enough to support businesses through another long winter.
Who would like that? Deputy Labey?
I think that's one for Senator Farnham, if I may say so, because that's completely...
I thought I was going to give you a break there. I was trying there, actually, for you, but...
I was trying to just be invisible for a minute there.
We did try.
Yeah, so today we've announced we are going to extend the current business support packages for the sectors of the economy that are still impacted by the border policy and the restrictions. But that's a very good question. It's a question we're discussing now, and we've asked officers to look at, because many businesses are carrying forward a great deal of detriment. And so one of the challenges I know faced in hospitality is that hospitality, hotels especially, the larger hotel assets that are essential to maintaining our tourism industry and future transport links, rely on having a strong July, August and September. And of course, if they're 10 or 15 or 20% down, then that might not sound a lot. But actually, if it's in the 3 months where you do 70% of your business, you're 20% down each month, that has a huge impact on your profitability and a huge impact on the ability to carry through another winter. So I think we're going to need to look at that, not just for hotels and hospitality, but for carried forward detriment across the sector, to see if any assistance will be needed to help businesses, largely to protect livelihoods through the winter. As I said earlier, it'd be a shame to have got to this stage and then start to lose some. Having said that, we've got to be careful that we're not, the economic term, and I don't use it, sort of the dead weight to the economy, and that means businesses that are unsustainable, or through changes to the economy, or changes to the structuring of certain sectors have become unviable. We don't want to be in a position where we're supporting those businesses, because all we're doing is prolonging the position, and those businesses should be converted or go into other sectors, if that makes sense. So,
really good question.
Yeah,
really good question.
It's something we're debating, and I'll be asking fellow ministers to consider that in due course. But of course, we have to remember that this is taxpayers' money. We need to protect livelihoods. We can't support business profits. We can't support maintenance of turnover. So help we provide is really survival to get people and businesses through the pandemic.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you very much, Scott, as well. So I'm conscious that we're coming to the close of this panel session, and we've referenced earlier the fact, and we've seen on social media and on the news only last week, that we're now under a year away to our next election, which is going to be held in June. And probably many of our viewers will have seen the IOD election campaign. And just to clarify for anybody that hasn't seen that, we're not supporting any individual or individuals or any party or parties. We're very much a neutral and impartial body. But what we would like to do is we have 2 objectives. One is to try and encourage more people to stand, and the other is to encourage more people to vote, because at the last election we had less than 50% of the Jersey residents voting. So over the course of the last 12 months, the team in IOD have been working with the states and with other key stakeholders who have kindly supported their campaign. And we've got a think tank of some former ministers who have been kindly speaking with those that are interested in standing. And we're delighted, because we only went live with our campaign 6 weeks ago, and we already have 7 candidates who've come forward, good calibre, diverse, experienced candidates that have come forward. So a real positive. But I think what I'd like to do as we start to wrap up is just literally a snapshot, perhaps a minute each, if I may, just ask you all in terms of the benefits of being a politician. Would you recommend it? Would you encourage people? I'm hoping, by the way, to end on a positive note this evening with some more candidates coming forward. So, Deputy Labey, could I start with you, please? Thank you.
Well, I've spent 3 years designing this new electoral process with my small committee of Deputy Alves and Deputy Wickenden and the Deputy Greffier. And it's all about getting greater civic engagement. Jersey has terrible figures for civic engagement, voter turnout. So the idea of changing our system, it's not for the politicians, it's for the voter. A, to get a fairer system, and B, to get elections that will be more meaningful, being able to get to know the candidates and what they stand for. And this is what I think the new districts will give us. So, and it is simpler too. So I think it will be more attractive. Certainly standing for election will be a more attractive option than either the old senatorial one or taking on a sitting candidate in a single seat who's been there for years and years and is very good. So I think it's going to attract more candidates and be easier and simpler, and I hope it attracts candidates from a diverse range.
Thank you. Senator Gorst, would you recommend standing?
I absolutely would. I can't recommend it enough. If you are passionate about politics or you're a political nerd, a bit like I am, this is a job to care for people, to help provide for people, to ensure that this island that I love and where my family's future is has got a strong future. You know, people criticise us right, left and centre. Jersey, they criticise politicians, they criticise ministers. All of that pales into insignificance of it. This is a job where you can help individual people deal with filling in a form or a planning application that can transform their lives. At the same time, it's a job where you're called upon to make decisions which can transform our economic future and the livelihoods of all of us. It is a fantastic job. If you feel passionate about Jersey, about your children's future, then stand in 2022 because our future is strong only if people who feel passionate stand to help govern the island.
Very, very wise words indeed, Minister. But it's not for the faint-hearted, is it? I mean, as we've seen over the course of the last few months, it's challenging exception for any leader, but particularly during the pandemic and on the back of Brexit. So again, Deputy Martin, would you, I mean, from what we've heard before, it's sounding fairly positive that you may stand again?
Yeah, it is fairly positive, and you know, everything being equal, I probably will. But I want to say to women out there, because people think, and it isn't 9 to 5, but that was I had a 4 and a 5-year-old and a teenager when I went into politics in 2000. And even then, I had so much flexibility. Yes, I know the days I had to be in the States, and I had to get those covered. That was, you know them a year ahead. But I got when computers come, they came and put a computer in my home. I can read a document anywhere. You know, you'll get the comments. Sometimes I'll be sitting on the beach. I've got a book like this, and oh, you're not working today. And of course, you're not working today. You're sitting where you're comfortable reading this massive document. The flexibility is fantastic, and I really don't know why. We've averaged between 9 and 14, I think, women in the whole time I've been there. The lowest 9, the highest 14, and we can't seem to get above that.
Hopefully you'll be encouraged, because those candidates that have come forward, I mean, obviously I'm not, they've got complete anonymity, but we've actually got 50-50 at the moment in terms of diversity coming forward. Yeah. And we've also got a good range of other forms of diversity as well, in terms of age, ethnicity as well, which I've seen, which is great for the island. Minister, from your perspective, it's been a tough few months for any leader, as I say. Would you recommend it again? Are you going to come back again for the island in terms of in the world of politics?
Well, can I start just by I wouldn't be able to get away with without saying that I think the removal of the island-wide mandate won't do anything to improve local politics. Now I've got that out of the way. Russell and I are still friends, but I just don't think that's right, and I'm not sure how that's going to provide more engagement for islanders. Being a states member is hugely demanding. It's hugely challenging. I've never worked so hard in my entire life but it's also hugely rewarding. It's full of highs and lows. But if you actually believe in what you're doing and you're doing it for the right reasons, I think that gives you the impetus and the drive to carry on. I like being a States member because it gives you the great opportunity to help people, and most of us do it because we like to help people. And although we all differ, I think every single States member, without exception, are doing it for the right reasons. And as our late colleague Len Norman said, every day he wanted to get up and make life just a little bit better for people. If you go into the States with that attitude, then I think you will succeed.
Yeah, phenomenal gentleman, and also a very wise words, actually, indeed. Right, I'm conscious of time, so 45 seconds each. In terms of what would you want to achieve in your final 12 months? Could I start with you, please?
All the things that I've mentioned are priorities. There was a Slido question that came up about inflation in building materials and what that do to house prices. That he's right to be worried about that, or she. Cement's gone up 35%, some timber 400%. So Jersey needs to get with the programme in terms of modern methods of construction, where the house is constructed away from the island and assembled here. It's cleaner, it's greener, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's better in terms of less labour intensive. And it's sophisticated now, these kit forms, these modular houses, and I'm starting a working party to look at that over the summer, and hopefully, you know, if we can get a 3-bed house to Portsmouth Docks for under £100,000, and then get it from to the island and the foundations, everything, for another £100,000, that will help our affordability.
When somebody else goes before you, you sometimes lose that 45 seconds.
Sorry.
So just, no, very much appreciated. So we're just about to wrap up. Sincere thanks to all of our audience here and also to our panellists for all of their insights. It really has been valuable indeed. Also to our audience at home for all of the questions which you have been pushing forward tonight. We've gotten through as many questions as we could. I think we've cleared most of the deck that we've seen, or certainly duplication. But if you haven't had a chance to put your questions forward, or you think of something after tonight's panel session, these sessions are helpfully being held every 6 weeks, with the next one on Tuesday, the 10th of August at 7 o'clock. So please do submit your questions on Slido by the same method as this evening. In the interim, it's my sincere thanks to our panellists. I know how busy you all are, so thank you very much indeed. I'd also like to express my sincere thanks to Christian May and his team at Government, and also Phil Bouchard and his team at 3CI, who are behind the production this evening. I'd also like to thank you, the viewers at home, for listening, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you and good night.